Madison screamed at the dirty woman inside the luxury boutique, not knowing she was the owner of the place. All eyes turned as she walked into the most expensive bridal boutique in Manhattan. Madison Parker, 28 years old, heiress of the prestigious Parker family, stepped in with unwavering confidence. Her dress sparkled, her heels echoed against a marble floor, and her gaze was sharp and commanding. Today was the day she would pick the wedding gown that would make social media explode with envy. Two of her bridesmaids followed behind, giggling and occasionally snapping secret photos. The boutique staff stood up straighter, wearing tight smiles as they welcomed Madison and her entourage. Champagne, and please, classical music. Not this one. I want Chopin, Madison said without looking at anyone, as if the entire place already belonged to her. But in a flash, the mood changed. In the corner of the boutique stood an older woman, wearing a tattered coat, messy hair, and dusty shoes. She was gently touching a delicate white veil hanging on a glass rack. Her fingers moved softly, her eyes filled with emotion. Madison froze, her brow raised, her eyes widened. "Wait a minute. Is she seriously touching that fabric?" she shouted. "Who let this woman in here?" Everyone turned, their bodies tense. The old woman remained silent, as if she didn't hear, or perhaps chose not to respond. Madison stepped forward, her voice rising. "This is a private boutique. For people like me. Not for, sorry, but street beggars. Just look at yourself." One of the staff members tried to intervene, but Madison cut her off sharply. "If she doesn't leave now, I will, and you'll lose the biggest sale of the year." The old woman slowly lowered her hand from veil. She looked down, then quietly walked toward the exit, without saying a single word. No one met her eyes. No one tried to stop her. Even the newly playing Chopin sounded bitter, like background music to a cruel scene. As the door clicked shut behind the woman, Madison tossed her hair and laughed lightly. "Some people really think they can sneak into our world," she said, reaching for a nearby white gown. None of the staff dared to reply. But behind Madison's confident laughter, something subtle had shifted inside that boutique. Something she hadn't noticed. Something that was about to change her life forever. The laughter had barely faded from Madison's lips when the boutique manager, Leona, stepped into the staff break room with a stiff jaw and pale expression. Two employees, Rachel and Anna, stood by the espresso machine, exchanging uneasy glances. Rachel whispered first. "She really just threw her out like that?" Anna nodded slowly. She didn't even blink, just humiliated her like a prop in a show. Leona dropped her clipboard on the table and spoke in a sharp whisper. "That woman, she comes here every week. Every Wednesday. For years." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "Then why didn't anyone say anything?" Leona hesitated. "Because she's Clara Reynolds." The room fell completely silent. "The Clara Reynolds?" Anna asked, her voice barely a breath. "The founder of this boutique?" Leona nodded. "She built this business from scratch 30 years ago. Started with one rack of dresses in a basement in Brooklyn. She may not dress like it, but this entire boutique exists because of her." Rachel swallowed hard. Why was she wearing those clothes? "Because Clara never cared about appearances," Leona said. "She comes like that to see how people are treated when they look like they have nothing." A knock on the back entrance interrupted them. One of the delivery staff opened the door to find a sharply dressed man holding a briefcase. Behind him was Clara, but she no longer looked like the woman Madison had screamed at. Now she wore a sleek dark coat, her gray-streaked hair pinned neatly behind her ears, and eyes full of fire that no one could ignore. Leona's voice trembled. "She's back, and she's not alone." The boutique's entrance bell chimed as Clara stepped inside. The tall man beside her, likely a lawyer, walked with precise confidence. A hush fell across the room. Customers lowered their voices. Staff members stood frozen, unsure whether to rush forward or disappear behind the displays. Madison was standing near a mirror, draping a lace veil across her shoulder. She barely looked up. "Oh, great," she muttered. "She's back again." The staff exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to intervene or let what was coming unfold. Clara walked slowly, her eyes scanning the boutique with calm intensity. The lawyer spoke briefly with Leona, who rushed over with reddening cheeks. "Miss Clara," she stammered. "We didn't know it happened so fast." Clara lifted her hand gently. "I'm not here to argue," she said. "I'd simply like to finish what I was doing and say a few words." Madison turned, still unaware of Clara's identity. Her tone was sharp and dismissive. "Look, I don't know why you're back, but this is a private shopping session, so maybe take your speech outside." Clara stepped closer, her eyes locked on Madison. The tension grew thick as fabric. "You raise your voice," Clara said quietly, "over a piece of fabric you didn't even design. You humiliated someone you didn't know, all because you didn't like the way she looked." Madison rolled her eyes. "Whatever. I have a wedding in 3 days, and I don't have time for—" Clara cut her off, calmly but firmly. "I'm Clara Reynolds. I founded this boutique. Every thread, every seam, every design in this room, it came through my hands." Madison's face lost all color. The veil slipped from her shoulder and floated to the floor in silence. The entire boutique held its breath. Madison stood motionless, her perfectly glossed lips slightly parted, as if waiting for someone to tell her it was all a joke. But no one laughed. Clara didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence filled the room with something far heavier than anger, dignity. Leona stepped forward, her voice low. "It's true. Miss Clara built this store. She owns everything in this building." Madison's hand trembled as she reached for the fallen veil. Her fingers stopped halfway, then slowly retracted. For the first time that day, she looked small. I didn't know," Madison whispered. Clara tilted her head slightly. "And if you had known, would you have treated me differently?" No answer came. In the corner, one of the boutique assistants was recording discreetly with her phone. She wasn't alone. 2 other customers had also pulled out their devices. The moment was already moving beyond the boutique's walls. Clara walked to the veil on the floor. She picked it up carefully and dusted it off with delicate fingers, like a mother brushing off a child who had fallen. "This veil," she said softly, "was inspired by my mother's wedding scarf. I used a stitch late at night in a basement, try and keep the fabric clean with only a candle for light. It took me 8 months to get this place open, 30 years to build its name. But sometimes," her eyes flicked to Madison, "it only takes 30 seconds to show who really belongs here." Madison's lips tightened. Her gaze darted toward the door as if considering escape. But Clara wasn't finished. She turned to Leona. "I'd like everyone to stop what they're doing and gather around." Within seconds, the boutique was a quiet circle of employees, customers, and Madison. Center stage in a moment she never expected to star in. Clara held the veil in her arms. "I'm going to tell you a story," she said. "Not about lace or stitches, but about respect." Clara stood in the center of the boutique, surrounded by people who a moment ago didn't give her a second glance. Now, all eyes were fixed on her. She unfolded the veil in her hands, her fingers gently smoothing the fabric. "My mother never had a wedding dress," Clara began. "She wore a scarf, worn and patched, but full of love. When I started this boutique, I wasn't chasing trends. I was chasing meaning. I wanted every woman, no matter her background, to feel worthy." She looked around the room, her voice calm but resonant. "But along the way, I learned something harder than sewing. I learned that appearances fool people, that someone with dirty shoes can own the building, and someone in diamonds can forget how to be human." Madison winced. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Clara continued. "I come here every Wednesday dressed plainly because I want to see the truth. Not what people say in press releases, not what they post online, but how they treat someone they believe has nothing to offer." Clara's gaze turned directly to Madison. "You failed that test today." Gasps murmured through the crowd. Someone near the window whispered, "She tested her?" Clara turned to the boutique staff. "But some of you didn't." Rachel tried to speak up. "So did Anna. And Leona, you kept quiet, but I could see in your eyes you knew." Leona lowered her head, ashamed. "Kindness," Clara said, "isn't something we sell in this boutique, but it is the foundation it was built on. And I won't let anyone, no matter how rich, how famous, or how loud, tear that down. She folded the veil again and handed it to Anna. Please return this to the display. It's not for sale anymore. Madison stepped forward, her voice cracking. I want to apologize. I didn't know. Clara raised her hand. This isn't about your apology. This is about everyone in this room remembering that the most expensive thing you wear is how you treat others. The silence in the boutique felt heavier than marble. Madison's shoulders slumped slightly, but pride still clung to her voice. I came here to buy the Parisian silk dress in the front window. I'll pay full price. Double, even. Just let's move on. Clara took a breath, then looked to Leona. Leona, has the dress been fitted for her? Leona hesitated, then shook her head. No, we were still in the browsing stage. She hadn't committed. Clara turned her eyes back to Madison. Then I'm canceling the order before it begins. Madison blinked, her voice sharpened again, desperation slipping into her tone. You can't do that. You don't know who my father is. I can have this place shut down in a day. Clara didn't flinch. She stepped forward until she was eye to eye with the woman who had humiliated her only an hour ago. Your father didn't build this place, Clara said softly. I did, with my hands. My lungs full of dust. My back bent over work tables for 20 years. This boutique has survived recessions, fires, and lawsuits. You think it can't survive your wedding? Madison's cheeks flushed red, part embarrassment, part rage. I have 3 days to find a gown. Clara nodded. Then I suggest you spend those days thinking about what kind of woman you want to be when you walk down the aisle. The crowd stayed silent. No applause, no cheers. Just a reverent stillness, as if no one dared disturb the finality of Clara's words. Madison's voice lowered to a whisper. This isn't over. Clara gave a gentle smile that didn't reach her eyes. For your sake, I hope it is. Madison turned on her heel and stormed out, the bell above the boutique door ringing like a closing chapter. But Clara knew the real story was only beginning. The boutique door closed behind Madison with sharp clang, but inside, the silence lingered. No one moved. Even the soft Chopin playing through speakers seemed to hesitate, as if unsure whether the moment had truly passed. Clara turned slowly, her expression unreadable. Then she gave a gentle nod to Leona. Let everyone go early today, Clara said. Paid. They've earned it. Leona exhaled with relief and immediately began guiding staff to back. But their eyes kept drifting toward Clara, now standing like a monument of quiet power in the center of her own creation. By that evening, the videos had already gone viral. One clip showed Madison screaming. Another showed Clara calmly, revealing her identity. Hashtags like hashtag boutique justice and hashtag the owner in disguise flooded social media. News outlets picked up the story. Bride bullies homeless woman at luxury boutique. Turns out she's a founder. Clara's old photograph resurfaced on the internet, black and white, smiling behind a sewing machine in a tiny basement. Her hair darker, her hands younger, but the strength in her eyes exactly the same. Reporters waited outside the boutique the next morning, but Clara didn't make a statement. She simply arrived as usual, coffee in hand, cardigan buttoned atop, and walked into the staff entrance without a word. Inside, she went straight to the corner where the veil had been. It now sat inside a glass case, freshly mounted overnight, with a small engraved plaque beneath it. Clara's veil, inspired by struggle, woven with dignity. Clara stared at it for a long moment, her reflection in the glass overlapping the soft folds of the fabric behind it. She didn't need headlines or interviews. Her story was already being told, thread by thread, stitch by stitch. Three days later, the wedding went on, but it was nothing like what Madison had imagined. Gone were the magazine photographers. The designer dress sponsor pulled out. The venue, once boasting a rooftop spread with a full orchestra, had scaled down to a modest garden hall in New Jersey. Guests dropped out, some politely, others without notice. Even her makeup artist canceled, citing a conflict. Madison stood before the mirror in a borrowed gown, her hair styled by a local freelancer she found last minute. Her reflection didn't match the image she had curated online for months. No diamonds, no drama, no spotlight, just silence. She walked down the aisle to half-filled seats. Whispers floated in the air like pollen, soft but irritating. Some eyes avoided hers. Others stared too long. The ceremony was quick. Her groom, Daniel, looked confused but didn't ask. He had tried the night before, but Madison brushed it off. "It's nothing," she had said. "Just stress." But it wasn't nothing. It was everywhere. The moment the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Madison smiled, but only with her lips. Her eyes never left the camera lens. Because for the first time, she wasn't sure if she wanted to be seen. After the ceremony, the couple slipped away from the guests and into the bridal suite. Daniel poured champagne. "Still want to do Paris for the honeymoon?" he asked. Madison hesitated. Her hand rested on the side of the glass, but didn't lift it. "Let's stay here for now," she said. "I think I need to fix some things first." Daniel raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Outside, the world was still talking, still posting, still sharing. And Madison, once the center of the celebration, had become a lesson. 1 week later, Clara sat alone in her modest office above the boutique. The room was filled with sketches, swatches, and framed photos, memories of decades of work stitched into every corner. Her assistant, Maya, knocked softly and stepped in. "There's another request," Maya said, holding a thick envelope. "This one's from a major news network. They want to do a televised interview. Prime time." Clara didn't even look up. "I've said everything I needed to." Maya nodded, then hesitated. "There's also a letter from her." Clara looked up. "From Madison?" Maya handed over a cream-colored envelope with shaky handwriting on the front. Clara opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten note. "Miss Clara, I was wrong. Not just for what I said to you, but for the person I've become. I thought I was strong because I had money, but you showed me that real strength doesn't scream. It stands still. I hope someday I can learn to stand like that too. I don't expect forgiveness, but I do want to say thank you. Madison Parker." Clara folded the note quietly and placed it on her desk. Her fingers lingered on the paper for a moment. "Sometimes," she said softly, more to herself than anyone, "lessons land in silence." Maya waited, unsure whether to speak. Finally, Clara looked up. "Call the reporter," she said. "Tell them I'll speak. Just once." The studio lights were hot, but Clara didn't flinch. She sat calmly in the interview chair, wearing a simple navy blouse and silver pins shaped like a needle and thread. The set had been arranged to resemble a boutique. Soft pink walls, mannequins, silk draped in the background. Across from her sat the host, a well-known morning anchor with millions of viewers tuning in. "Clara Reynolds," the host began, "thank you for joining us. You become something of a legend this past week. But before the headlines, before the viral videos, who are you really?" Clara smiled gently. "I was a girl who loved fabric. That's all." The host leaned forward. "And now you run one of the most respected bridal empires in the country. But you still walk your shop floors in worn shoes and an old coat. Why?" Clara's eyes didn't waver. "Because I wanted to know the truth. Not about my business, about people. When I dress like no one, I see everyone." There was a pause. "And what did you see that day?" Clara took a breath. "I saw someone drowning in pride. I saw a staff too afraid to speak. But I also saw courage in quiet eyes. I saw who really stood for what this boutique is meant to represent." The host nodded slowly. "You didn't press charges. You didn't go after her publicly. Why?" Clara tilted her head slightly. "Because I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in change. And sometimes shame in the public square teaches less than grace behind closed doors." The studio fell quiet. A soft chime played to signal commercial break, but the moment lingered long after. Later that night, the interview aired across the nation. Comments flooded in from teachers, waitresses, janitors, and small business owners. Stories of how they, too, had been judged by their appearance, and how Clara reminded them they were not alone. In boutiques across the country, signs began to appear on doors. Kindness required, elegance welcome. And in one small boutique in Manhattan, the line grew longer than ever before, not just for dresses, but for something much rarer, respect. A month had passed since the interview, but the impact was only growing stronger. Clara sat at the boutique's window display, sipping tea while watching the midday rush outside. Tourists walked by, often pause and take photos. But it wasn't the gowns that held their gaze anymore. It was the plaque, Clara's veil, a reminder that elegance begins within. The boutique had become more than just a shop. It was a symbol. Brides came not just for fabric and lace, but for the story, her story. Inside, the mood had shifted too. The staff walked with more purpose. Customers greeted one another. Even the seating area had changed. A bookshelf now sat by the waiting couches, filled with memoirs by women entrepreneurs and stories about dignity and resilience. One afternoon, as Clara was reviewing sketches, Leona walked in. "There's someone here asking to speak with you." Clara looked up. Leona hesitated. "It's Madison." Clara closed her sketchbook slowly. "Let her in." Madison entered alone. No entourage, no makeup artist. Just a simple beige dress and a soft scarf wrapped around her shoulders. She stood quietly for a moment, taking in the boutique. Her eyes landed on the glass case, holding the veil. "I didn't expect you want to see me," she said. "I didn't expect you want to come back," Clara replied. Madison stepped closer. "I've been volunteering at a women's shelter in Queens. I've met girls who look like you did that day, and I've heard their stories. I'm not proud of mine." Clara studied her for a long moment. "What are you looking for, Madison?" Madison hesitated. "I want to commission a dress," she said finally. "Not for a wedding. For myself. For who I'm trying to become." Clara nodded. "Then you're in the right place." Over the next few weeks, Madison returned to boutique every Friday. Always alone. Always early. She never demanded anything. Never raised her voice. She listened more than she spoke. Clara assigned her to work closely with Anna, one of the younger designers. The process was deliberate, intimate, and unlike anything Madison had experienced before. It wasn't just about choosing a color or silhouette. It was about telling a story. "Why not white?" Anna asked one day. Madison paused, looking down at the soft slate blue fabric in her hands. "Because white used to mean purity," she said. "But I don't want to pretend I've always been clean. I want a color that feels like honesty." Anna smiled and began her first sketch. They chose a flowing, soft-cut gown in muted blue silk. It shimmered just slightly, like moonlight on calm water. There were no diamonds, no crystals, no dramatic trains. Only subtle embroidery along the waist. A single thread in ivory that curved like a question mark. Unfinished but deliberate. When the final fitting day arrived, Clara entered the room without a word. She circled Madison slowly, inspecting the gown, the posture, the stillness. "It suits you," Clara said. Madison looked into the mirror. Her eyes met her own reflection, not as a bride, not as an heiress, but as a woman learning who she was beyond reputation. "Thank you," she whispered. Clara rested a hand on her shoulder. "Don't thank me." You walked back through the door. That was the hardest part. They stood together for a moment in silence. Then Clara spoke softly. "Would you allow me to add one stitch?" Madison nodded. Clara took a silver needle from her pocket, threaded it with pale gold, and placed a single, tiny X on the inside hem of the gown, hidden to the world, but known to the wearer. "For the part of you that decided to change," Clara said. Madison smiled without words. 2 months later, the boutique received an unexpected invitation. Clara had been nominated for a Lifetime Achievement Award by the National Fashion Guild. The ceremony would be held at the Met Hall, and designers, celebrities, and media from across the country were expected to attend. But what caught Clara's attention wasn't her name on the invitation. It was a handwritten note clipped to the edge. "We would be honored if one of your dresses was worn on stage, not for the red carpet, but for the speech. A piece that tells a story." Clara didn't hesitate. She picked up the phone and dialed a familiar number. "Madison," she said. Are you free on April 22nd? The evening of the gala arrived. Backstage, Madison sat calmly in a chair, dressed in the slate blue gown. Her hair was swept into a soft twist, no glitter, no jewels, just elegance born of humility. The air buzzed with stylists, stagehands, and producers rushing to meet cues. But inside the dressing room, time felt still. Clara entered with a small garment bag. She unzipped it slowly, revealing a short shawl made of sheer organza with hand-stitched detailing across the shoulders. Tiny words embroidered in golden thread. Strength is quiet. Clara placed it gently around Madison's shoulders. You don't need a crown to be seen, she said, but you've earned this. A stagehand knocked twice. Miss Parker, you're on in 3 minutes. Madison stood up, smoothed the gown, and turned to Clara. I don't know if I'll say the right words. You don't have to, Clara said. Just tell the truth. Madison walked toward the stage curtain, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The crowd beyond waited, unaware that the woman about to step onto the stage was once the villain of a story they thought they knew. But tonight, she would speak as something else entirely. The spotlight lit the stage in warm gold. Madison stepped out slowly, her figure graceful but steady, the slate blue gown catching every shimmer like it carried the weight of the moment. For a heartbeat, the audience was silent. Then a ripple of recognition moved across the crowd. Whispers, exchanged looks, phones rising slowly. Some knew her from tabloids, some from gossip, but most remember her from a viral video where she screamed in a boutique at a woman she didn't recognize. And now here she was, walking toward the podium, not to defend herself, but to speak. She took a breath. When I was a child, Madison began, her voice clear and slow, I thought power meant being the loudest voice in the room. I thought beauty lived in price tags. And I thought respect was something you could buy. She paused, her hands gently resting on the podium. I was wrong. The room remained utterly still. Some of you may remember me for something shameful. And that's fair. I can't erase it. But what I want to share tonight is not an excuse. It's a mirror, because who we are when no one is watching is who we truly become. She glanced down, touching the gold-stitched shawl on her shoulders. This gown I'm wearing wasn't designed to impress a camera. It wasn't made for a wedding or a runway. It was made to remind me who I'm becoming. With every stitch, it tells a different story than the one I lived before. There was a slight shift in the room. Posture changes, subtle nods, a collective leaning forward. And there's someone in this room who taught me that real elegance isn't worn. It's practiced. In patience. In restraint. In listening when you'd rather speak. She looked across the crowd and found Clara's face, calm, unreadable, but watching. Madison smiled. I am no designer. But if I could design one thing tonight, it would be a new kind of apology. One not written in public statements, but in changed behavior. A hush lingered. Then slowly, applause began. Not thunderous, not explosive, but deep, sustained, sincere. As Madison stepped back from the podium, she wasn't met with flashing cameras or paparazzi. She was met with respect. And for the first time, that was enough. The gala ended in soft lights and standing ovations. But for Clara, it wasn't the applause that stayed with her. It was the silence that followed, the kind that only came after something real had been said. Back at the boutique the next morning, the sunlight poured through the front windows. The city buzzed outside, but inside, everything felt calm. Clara stood at her work table, fingertips brushing against a bolt of new fabric. Beside her was a fresh sketch, something simple, clean, full of motion. Maya entered quietly. You should have seen the inbox this morning, she said. Mothers, students, even some COs, all writing to say they cried last night, that they saw themselves in her. Clara smiled without turning around. She finally saw herself. Maya stepped forward. And now they want to know, will you design something with her? A new collection. The Clara and Madison line. That's what the media is calling for. Clara chuckled softly. I didn't teach her to become famous. I taught her to stand still. Fame is loud. Growth is quiet. She walked to the display case and opened the glass. Carefully, she lifted the veil, the one that had started everything. She carried it to the back of the boutique, into a small side room. The walls were covered in framed swatches, old sketches, and yellowed newspaper clippings. A single mannequin stood in the center, waiting. Clara draped a veil over it. Then she took a needle and gold thread. With slow, steady hands, she stitched a final line into the edge. Not a name, not a logo, just 2 words. Begin again. She stood back, tears quietly brimming, but not from sadness, from completion. In the front of the boutique, the bell chimed. A young woman entered, unsure of herself. Her coat was secondhand, her shoes scuffed. She clutched a folded piece of paper in her hand, a sketch of a dress she'd drawn herself. Clara turned, smiled gently, and stepped forward. "Welcome in," she said. "Let's create something together." And just like that, another story began.